In October 2025, a study finally answered a question that researchers have been asking for decades. Why does breastfeeding reduce the risk of breast cancer? And the answer involves something happening in your immune system that lasts for years, even after you finish breastfeeding. Welcome back, I'm Joanna. I make short videos on research-based academic papers and data across various parenting topics, education, breastfeeding, nursery, behaviour, literally anything that I think a parent would find useful to ideally make informed decisions to be better parents together. If you like that idea, please do hit like and subscribe. I'd love to have you follow along the journey. So we have known for quite a long time from population level data that breastfeeding appears to protect against breast cancer. A meta-analysis published in the International Breastfeeding Journal in early 2026, so this year, pulled 23 case-controlled studies, found that women who never breastfed had a 40% increased risk of breast cancer compared to those who did breastfeed. And it's worth noting that this figure comes with higher heterogeneity across studies, meaning that there's considerable variation, so treat it as a ballpark rather than a precise number. And this protection appears to be strongest against a particularly aggressive form of breast cancer, the triple negative breast cancer, TNBC, which lacks the hormone receptors that most therapies target, making it harder to treat. And the researchers didn't fully understand why. The hormonal explanation that breastfeeding suppresses ovulation, reducing lifetime estrogen exposure, was part of the picture, but it didn't explain everything. There was also evidence that there is a dose-response relationship. The longer the breastfeeding, the greater the protective effect, which pointed to something more active than just hormone suppression alone. The breakthrough came through in October 2025, a paper published in Nature by researchers at the Peter MacCallum Cancer Centre in Melbourne, Australia, one of the world's leading cancer research institutions. And it spans both mouse models and over 1,000 human patient samples. And what they found is that pregnancy followed by breastfeeding, specifically a complete cycle of lactation and involution, which is the process where breast tissue returns to its pre-pregnancy state after weaning, drives the accumulation of specialised immune cells called CD8 plus cells in breast tissue. These cells have tissue-resident memory profile, meaning that they take up long-term residence in breast tissue and remain there on guard. In 2 independent cohorts of patients with breast cancer, breastfeeding was associated with an increase in those CD8 plus T cells. And in mouse models, tumour growth was significantly reduced after a complete cycle of lactation. But this protection disappeared when the CD8 plus cells were depleted. This is significant. It means that protection isn't just a hormonal side effect, it's an active immune mechanism. Breastfeeding appears to train your immune system to recognise and attack breast cancer cells for years, possibly decades after you stop breastfeeding. Now let's look at the involution point here. The protection was only observed after a complete cycle of lactation and involution of weaning. Involution is the biological process where breast tissue remodels itself after weaning. It's not just stopping breastfeeding, it's the full biological process of your body resetting after lactation that seems to trigger this immune programming. This is an emerging area of research and there's still a lot to understand, and we don't know how, for example, how long this effect persists, whether it applies equally across all breast cancer subtypes, and whether the duration of breastfeeding affects the magnitude of the immune response. But it represents a new fundamental way of understanding how breastfeeding protects against cancer. So what else is going on biologically? The T cell mechanism is a new finding, but it sits amongst other biological processes that researchers already knew about. Breastfeeding suppresses ovulation, which reduces lifetime estrogen exposure. This hormonal effect is thought to limit the proliferation of breast cells and to reduce the risk of malignant transformations. During breastfeeding, the breast also sheds and renews cells, which may eliminate damaged cells before they can develop further. There's also emerging evidence around epigenetics, specifically that breastfeeding impacts and influences DNA methylation patterns in breast tissue in ways that suppress cancer-promoting gene expression. The components of breast milk itself, including immune cells and antibodies, may have direct anti-cancer effects within the breast tissue. Now, what about pumping? This is a question I know I'll get loads of comments about. Most studies on breastfeeding and cancer don't distinguish between breastfeeding at the breast and pumping. However, pumping has a similar biological effect on the body as direct breastfeeding, which may mean that the protective mechanisms would still apply equally. The involution research specifically looks at the full cycle of lactation, which would apply to pumping as well. This is an area which needs much more research, and the current picture is reasonably reassuring for those who are pumping. Now let's look at the limitation and caveats of these studies. The Virasamy Nature study was conducted primarily in animal models with human data from clinical cancer cohorts, meaning that it included women who already had breast cancer rather than following healthy women over time. And that's an important distinction. The epidemiological data on risk reduction comes from separate population studies. Putting the two together builds a compelling picture, but mechanistic findings still need to be validated in prospective human trials. The Mutahar meta-analysis used exclusively case-controlled studies, which are a weaker study design, and the heterogeneity was high, meaning that there was considerable variation between the studies. The 40% increased risk figure is pooled across various different populations as well. It's also worth noting that breast cancer risk is also influenced by many factors: genetics, age, first pregnancy, family history of cancer, weight, alcohol consumption, and more. Breastfeeding is one modifiable factor in a very complex picture. So what is our parenting takeaway? What does it mean to you? Well, this research belongs to you. It's not something that just benefits your baby, but something that may genuinely reduce your own risk of one of the most common cancers affecting women. The protection against the triple negative breast cancer is particularly clinically meaningful because it's the hardest subtype of cancer to treat. If you are currently breastfeeding and wondering whether to continue, there's growing evidence to say that the longer that you go, the more your immune system may benefit. And if you couldn't breastfeed, or if you breastfed briefly, it doesn't mean that you're at high risk at all. The absolute numbers are still in your favour. It's worth talking to your GP about your overall breast cancer risk pictures if you have other risk factors there. The science of breastfeeding is genuinely moving very fast at the moment, and it's moving in directions that I think is going to genuinely change and transform how we think and approach maternal health, maternity, breastfeeding and pregnancy, as well as infant health as well. I'll link all of the papers below so you can have a look yourself, and if this kind of research matters to you, please do hit like, subscribe and comment. The more that you engage with these videos, the more it gets pushed out to other mums and parents who need to know this sort of information. It really helps to spread awareness, so I hope you can do that. That would be really appreciated. And until next time, I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you for another video soon. See you later.